Joe Biden has announced a $7 billion worth investment in solar energy projects, focusing on disadvantaged communities and unveiling a week-long series of what the White House says will be historic climate actions. The new measures by Biden administration aims to tackle the climate crises and increase access to low-cost clean energy. The $7 billion grant through the Environmental Protection Agency is a part of Solar for All program, which the government says will benefit hundreds and thousands of mostly low-income families who currently spend up to 30% of their income on energy. The scheme is quite similar to India's PM Muft Bijli Yojana, which aims to benefit middle-income families with a dedicated corpus of approximately $9 billion. How similar are the two schemes and what does it really mean on a comparison level? Let's understand from Karthik Malhotra. He's joining us here in the studio. Karthik, hi. Interesting comparison that we're trying to draw up here between what US has announced by the way of a $7 billion worth solar scheme, what India has already announced a couple of weeks ago, a $9 billion worth of solar scheme.
Interesting that both countries are actually headed for elections. India is already in the midst of elections and US is slated for elections in the month of November 2024. And hence, you cannot help but make some comparisons when it comes to what it means for the vote bank. But I think let's come to the vote bank subsequently. Let's look at how similar or different, if at all, the two projects are. So primarily they are both solar rooftop projects. Primarily they are both residential solar rooftop projects. So what this means is that both Joe Biden and Narendra Modi are looking at installing solar rooftop panels across houses in both the countries. Now let's move on and look at what the nomenclature of these particular schemes really is. So in the US, Joe Biden is calling the scheme Solar for All. In India, Prime Minister Modi is calling it PM Muft Bijli Yojana. And the word Muft is really important here because eventually this is going to entail 300 units of free electricity for households that opt for the solar rooftop panel. Now, this scheme was incidentally announced by Prime Minister Modi ahead of the union budget and it was notified on the 15th of February 2024. However, Joe Biden made this announcement on World Earth Day just yesterday, which is 22nd of April. So a good 2 months after Prime Minister Modi made the announcement, and in fact the announcement was notified, did Joe Biden actually make a very similar announcement. So, obviously the message is fairly clear that India had taken the lead in a scheme like this, an initiative like this, and you were talking about G7 earlier, the leader pretty much of the global economy comes in about 2 months too late. Now, the government investment in the case of US is about $7 billion, and compare this to 75,000 crore rupees which the Indian government had outlaid as part of this particular solar initiative scheme. It translates at about 84 rupees to a dollar. Right now, it translates to about 9 billion. So, on the face of it, it seems that India's solar energy scheme is going to be $2 billion more expensive than the US. But look at the unit cost and you'll see the India advantage in this scheme. Joe Biden's scheme is likely to impact only 1 million households. That's 10 lakh households. The PM Muft Bijli Yojana is likely to impact 1 crore houses. So that is 10 times the cost, 10 times the impact of the US scheme at a delta of just about $2 on a 7 billion investment on US and 9 billion in the case of India. Let's move on. Now, what is the model employed here? This is a completely government-led 100% subsidy scheme where the government in the US is going to take control of all the investments and make those investments on its own accord. Whereas in the case of India, it's a 60-40 split where the government is going to bear 60% of the cost and households that go ahead and install these solar rooftop panels will bear about 40% of the cost. Now, with that 40% cost built in, the recovery time for Indian citizens is not likely to be anything more than 2 to 2.5 years, assuming that one solar panel on the rooftop will be about ₹1 lakh. So 40,000 rupees investment is going to lead to savings anywhere between 15 to 18,000 rupees per annum for Indian households, 1 crore of them, as compared to a much larger on paper, about 33,000 rupees in the case of US. Now, who does this scheme appeal to? In the case of US, climate-sensitive youth is a large constituency that Joe Biden is after and wants to influence some change in the voting pattern when it comes to the youth, which understand climate change and are more sensitive about the climate change objectives not being met. In the case of India, I think the scheme name tells it all. It is targeted towards the middle class who have pakka houses and are willing to make that investment of solar rooftop.
All right, and before we move on from the story, of course calling it India's, or rather election promises, because these come at a very crucial time. India is in the midst of election. US is just about to get into elections.
That's
and
right.
Those are important promises for clean energy, albeit in election time.
Absolutely. So I think, the timing of any scheme being announced in election year obviously has a direct linkage to the vote bank. And like I mentioned, I think, Prime Minister Modi had announced this scheme in the month of February. Joe Biden is announcing it just in the month of April. He still has more than 6 months to go for elections. And as he gets into election season, this becomes a critical sort of scheme to influence the vote bank, especially those of the youth in the US, which he believes could vote for the Democratic Party.
All right, will they, won't they, we don't know, but an important scheme by the US government at this point in time, Solar for All, with a dedicated corpus of about $7 billion, ensuring to provide 100% subsidy on solar panels for people who are climate sensitive, and that could be, of course, one of the vote bank for Joe Biden.